Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chen.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. However, as we are at the end of the year in December, it has been a Cinema in Context tradition that we do a bit of a wrap-up of the year. This wrap-up has taken slightly different forms each year, but it's fair to say we pick our best picks, talk about them for a bit, and as we often record this earlier in the end-of-year season, we sometimes have to make some predictions as well about what's coming up over the Christmas period. So sit back, relax. We try to be relatively spoiler-free in these episodes.
Yes.
But hey, let's jump into it and see where we go.
Just the celebration of stuff that we've really liked this year.
Yeah.
I think these are always my favourite episodes to record.
I think these are some of our highest listened to episodes because it doesn't require you to have seen the two films that we're talking about, which is great. Now, team, we're not going to do this episode as a Patreon episode, so we're going to give you the whole shebang. But I encourage you to go back and listen to some of our Patreon content of the last 12 months. There's some good stuff in there. And today, just to give you a bit of a structure about how this is going to go, we're going to start by talking about our film of the year. We're going to talk about our biggest surprise of the year, our biggest disappointment of the year. Not necessarily the worst film, just the film that we might have had different expectations for and they didn't live up to them. Our wildcard, either film or television of the year. And then we're going to finish off with our favourite TV show, which has been a new introduction to these conversations because the world of TV is such a
rich and nourishing plate.
It is. It is. And it really is
yum.
not much difference these days between film and television.
Maybe even better.
Oh, cool. Well, let's start off with our film of the year. And I can see, Sarah, you are sitting ready. You've got your book resting against your coffee cup.
Because I don't want anyone to see my answers. You see, if I had another book, I'd be putting it around the edges so you couldn't see. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish that I could be controversial and come up with a best film of the year that somebody somewhere hadn't already said was the best of something. But ladies and gentlemen, as a bit of background for you, as a professional reviewer, I was horrified to go back over this year and see that I've given 2 films 5 stars this year.
What are these films?
Normally, I've gone ham on the 5 stars, and this is not one of those years. I will be coming to the other one in due course. So let's just bust straight into it. My best film of the year is the Palme d'Or winning film by Justine Triet, and it's Anatomy of a Fall. Now, you have seen it, William, but you have not seen it, Jeremy.
That is correct.
Okay, so basically, Anatomy of a Fall is, and these are not spoilers. This is the plot. Anatomy of a Fall is a French drama. It has a German protagonist, heroine in Sandra Hüller, who you may or may not have seen in the dreadful, excruciating film Tony Erdmann many years ago. But anyway, Sandra Hüller is the wife of a husband, as often happens with wives and husbands. Her husband dies under circumstances that can't be determined properly or accurately, and therefore legal proceedings ensue. Now, full disclosure, long before film came into my life in a big way, I trained as a defense lawyer and I qualified as a lawyer, and I am thrilled by the criminal legal arena. The French do it differently to us in the Commonwealth and Britain countries. And it was fascinating for me to watch Anatomy of a Fall because it goes through all of the court and legal procedures, as well as being a gripping and beautifully acted drama. It's completely enthralling. And everything about it is amazing. And it's written and directed by a French, or at least directed by a French woman, Justine Triet. And Anatomy of a Fall won the Palme d'Or, and I can see why. And I can't go higher than that, I'm afraid. So that, for me, was my best film of the year.
Awesome. Does that mean it will be at the Oscars next year, or it's already had its chance at the Oscars?
It will come into the Oscars next year because it won the Palme d'Or in May. And so it will probably be up for Best International Foreign Language Film, or whatever we call it now.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think my feelings on the movie are just... It really, for something so on paper simple, right?
Yeah.
It's a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
Most of it takes place in one location. The storytelling and especially the thematic resonance is just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like there's so much that this movie says without explicitly saying it.
Yeah.
And I love that fuzziness around the edges. And I think thematically that's one of the points, right?
And the fuzziness
Yeah.
is one of the points as well, because this is not about gangsters, criminals, or baddies. This is real people struggling to give an accurate witness statement, struggling to remember exactly how something went, struggling to remember whether they actually heard this or they maybe didn't hear that. And that is all real. And therefore, rather than it being a polarizing stories of obvious baddies and obvious goodies, it's very, very human and fascinating in that regard. So, yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
William, what's your film of the year?
All right. Well, as with the last couple of years, I've just added a whole bunch of stuff to my runners-up list.
Can we just appreciate that this is written on the back of a camp schedule from your activities
week? Yeah.
Nice.
I was, you stand around for hours and I had to do something with my time. Just think about movies.
Right, runners up, go.
Okay, so just a word of warning, dear co-hosts and listeners. I saw a lot of cartoons this year. Like a lot of
what a
animated
surprise!
things. I know, right? I know, me and cartoons.
What?
Really, really beautiful cel-shaded cartoons. Okay, so we are talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, which is something I've been celebrating and trying to get you guys to watch for a long time. It's awesome. I know. I don't think any of us are really into the Turtles. I know. I've never been a big Turtles fan, but something about this movie. It's written by Seth Rogen and Eric Goldberg. It just taps into the young peopleness of the whole thing. Right? This is a franchise with teenage in its name, and yet hardly have the Turtles ever felt like teenagers because they're usually voiced by 30 and 40s men, right? Whereas this, they got a kid cast, everything feels vibrant, the dialogue is very, very current. Like there's references to stuff like TikTok, to K-pop, to anime. It's like, this is just stuff kids like.
And it's written and directed by grown-up men
Yes.
who behave like teenagers.
Exactly, which is the...
who are teenage for life.
What's wonderful is that's part of the advertising. It's like from eternal teenager Seth Rogen.
Exactly. So yeah.
And it's beautiful. I know a lot of people compare it to Spider-Verse, but it does something different. It's very chunky. It feels like early Nickelodeon stuff, and it's very heartfelt. Just a lovely, lovely movie. And then speaking of Spider-Verse, second run-up is Across the Spider-Verse. What a tour de force.
Yeah, that was neat. It was
think
really good.
The first Spider-Verse kind of set the bar so high as to what American animation could actually be. And this movie takes that bar and just like blows it out of the water, to mix metaphors. The third in this trio is the Netflix original Nimona. Which has a long, sordid, and quite sad production history. This was the final film of Blue Sky Studios before Disney purchased their parent company Fox, and Disney just shut the entire production down because it was A, too expensive, and B, really leans heavily into queer themes, and Disney are like, nope, not on our watch. And other Annapurna actually picked it up, had other studios finish it. And it's a wonderful movie. It's a little cheaper than the other two movies on my list, but highly, highly recommended. Based on a webcomic about a shapeshifter in kind of like a techno medieval kingdom. But sorry, ladies and gents, we finally come to my film of the year. And this is something that I cheated a little bit because officially it came out in 2022. However, it came out here, in Christmas. I saw it in January. And it is a movie that I just keep going back to again and again and again. It is a film set in the Shrekiverse. It is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Oh, yeah.
Directed by Joel
Who is your favorite hero or something?
Yeah, I know, Sarah, you enjoyed it, right?
Yeah.
It's
very much.
I think it's in my opinion, a masterpiece. There's so much that this movie does right. And again, this is the franchise that gave us friggin' Shrek the Third, you know. Shrek has single-handedly destroyed American animation for 2 decades. And you come out with this movie, which is a spin-off of a spin-off, or a sequel of a spin-off.
Yeah.
And it's creatively, artistically, and narratively one of the most exciting things to happen
It's wonderful.
in Western animation.
And it's great as well for kids, because I took the little 6.5-year-old nephew.
Nice.
It's great for and I took his mother, who's very hard to please, my sister, and we all thoroughly enjoyed it.
Nice.
So it is actually legit one of those animated movies that is great for adults as well. And it's not because they're making rude, nose tap sex jokes that only adults will get. It's just funny and relevant and clever and cool and rad. You make me want to see it again. I'm writing it on my list. Yeah.
And just all of that, plus it's really heartfelt. Like,
Yeah.
it's a simple message about, Puss loses 8 of his lives and needs to appreciate what
It's
he has in
maths,
this life.
basically.
Well, I had to think long and hard about this. I don't feel like this year has been a great year of films for me.
Yeah.
There might have been great films I've missed, but my gosh, it's been a sparse year. I agree with you, Sarah, when you kind of look back at your ratings. I mean, the most fun, enjoyable, and satisfying experience I had at the cinema was watching Triangle of Sadness with
Yes,
you.
yes.
But that technically came out in 2022. I do think Barbie is the film of the year. Like, it's the biggest.
Undoubtedly.
It's just been so influential, but I wouldn't necessarily put that, as my film. The movie that I am going to choose, though, is something that we have done in our podcast this year, and I had a great time watching it. I was on the plane ride back from Brisbane a few weeks ago, and my sister was watching it, and I just was laughing next to her with her, and I knew that she was going to love it. And she was like, "That's one of the best things I've seen in a long time."
And it was Oppenheimer.
I laugh a minute.
Yeah.
Theatre Camp.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's just got so many layers to it that connect with me. I mentioned on our podcast that as a teacher, as someone who went to Christian camps, and as a theatre kid, there's so many things to get out of it.
Yeah.
The jokes hold up. Even rewatching it with my sister in little spurts and starts or whatever, because I kind of put the headphone in my ear and looked at her screen on the airplane. There's funny moments, like just that moment where, and I mentioned to you the other night, William, where the choreographer's watching the final performance and goes, "They didn't get all the moves, but that's okay. That's okay." Sort of placating himself. It's a wonderful watch. Not the most perfect, groundbreaking movie, but in a year of kind of averageness,
Yeah.
Theatre Camp is gonna be my pick.
Great.
Awesome. Great pick.
All right, well, shall I roll into my biggest surprise of 2023?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think my biggest and most thrilling moment in the cinema was the opening of Scream 6. I think that was just great. Wow. I don't want to say too much, just to spoil it. William is yet to see it, and listeners won't have heard it. The rest of the film is fine. But I actually think my biggest surprise this year is a movie that we focused on last month, which is Napoleon.
Hey.
Sarah's face is
Wait,
like...
biggest surprise as in better than you thought it would be?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I really
Right.
enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
mean, William and I went together. It was a school night near the end of the term. I was exhausted. We went and saw it at like 6:45 at night, and we were still getting out of the cinema at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I was actually falling asleep during the Waterloo sequence because I
Yeah.
was so tired.
Yeah.
But that was not because of the movie. Like, that movie kept me as engaged as it could. I was so taken by the lead actors' performances, both Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby. I just really enjoy later Ridley Scott movies. I mean, I mentioned in an episode last month, The Last Duel, House of Gucci. None of these are like perfect. They're not your Aliens or your Blade Runners or your Gladiators,
Sure.
but they are just really well made movies. And William, you said as well last time, like, we don't make movies like this anymore.
Yeah.
So I think Napoleon is my
Your
biggest
big surprise. Okay.
Sarah, jump in.
Well, my biggest surprise was my only other 5-star rated film this year. Now, I'll tell you for why it was a surprise. On paper, this film starring Bill Nighy, I like Bill Nighy, but I also think sometimes he just has this shtick that he does.
Just plays himself.
Exactly. It was promised as a film about an old man in England several decades ago, learning what's important in life. And it's called Living.
You've talked about this before.
Well, I have.
I feel like you have talked about it before in an episode.
Because it was absolutely stunning. So Bill Nighy plays, as I say, just an administrative office dude approaching retirement. He's not married and doesn't have children. He's just a nice but a very upright sort of citizen in London. And I guess we're talking, I should know properly, 40s, 50s kind of thing.
Oh,
1950s.
So it's a period piece.
It's very much a period piece. And look, to be fair to me, it wasn't that I was all sneery about it and I was going to be like, oh God, that sounds boring. I just thought, well, you know, it'll just be one of those kind of, you know, Bridgeway movies or Lido Ibsen,
I mean,
listener crowd kind of, for whom I write.
But in a little bit, I listened to our last year's episode in preparation for this, and your detailing of It Snows in Benidorm is still one of my favourite moments of our podcast.
Because that was a terrible,
Yeah, I remember.
terrible
And you
Timothy
did
Spall
your
movie.
northern accent. Oh, and looking
probably
up the
did.
clouds.
That's right, yeah. See, the fact that you remember that. So this man, no, because he's in London. So anyway, so here's the thing. Bill Nighy earned his first Oscar nomination for Living, and absolutely rightly. I mean, he did not win.
What a terrible name of a movie. Can we just
I
appreciate
know.
that's a boring...
I know.
It's like that.
boring.
I always go on about everything... No, not everything everywhere once.
It's-
What's that? People,
it-
places, things is the one that I can't stand.
It's like, oh, what do you need to make a movie? You need people, places, and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But anyway, I described this in my review as a gently devastating tale, and I think that is one of its many, many strengths. This is not a spoiler. He is a lovely man. He gets some difficult news, and he lives. And he has encounters with random people, none of which, this is a spoiler, none of which go creepy or it's not sugar-coated. It's not that it is saccharine or anything like that at all. It's just
Wholesome?
wholesome and heartwarming. The performance is quietly devastating. It's British as, and it is now. If I'm right, it's this is important to say. So basically, it is a remake of Akira Kurosawa's 1952 classic Ikiru. So it's taking the Japanese sensibility of dignity and quiet living and respect and all that, transposing it effortlessly to the Britain of the 1950s because that's how that sort of class would have been. Yeah, no big histrionics, no big pronouncements, just a glorious film.
Oh, you're selling it to me.
Oh, extraordinary.
It's reminding me a bit of Nomadland, just the way you're describing it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite understated, but very rich.
Absolutely.
in emotion.
100% true. Yeah. So yeah, Bill Nighy, eh? Go you. Anyway, that was my biggest surprise because I didn't expect it to be anything much, and it was incredible.
Cool. William, what's your biggest surprise of 2023?
All right, so this year was Disney's 100th celebration, and it's been super cynical. Right, I don't know if you guys have seen all the Westfield 100, and here's your childhood packaged and ready to buy. It's awful, and this is coming from we've talked about this before.
This is coming from someone with Playmobil all over his dining table.
But I also have to say,
I've got a Cookie Monster cookie jar right
when I
there.
was in Disney World last year, and it was their 50th anniversary of the park. It was so commercial. It didn't feel like a celebration at all. It just felt like another reason to take money off me. Which is really sad.
It's gross.
Yeah.
And in Disney World as well,
And back in the day when Disney would have anniversaries, it would feel like an event. They would release a film out of the archives and, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was with that heavy heart that I went into a short that they released on Disney Plus in October, November, called Once Upon a Studio. And the advertising around this was like, so you know those movies you loved as a kid? Well, there's a short where all of them come out of their frames and have a good time and host a party in Walt Disney Animation Studios. And it sounded like the most, to use that word, saccharine piece of doo-doo out there. And so I watched it, and oh my God, this thing is a masterpiece.
Did you cry in that as well?
I did. I actually did. Yeah. No, maybe not because of the visuals, but because it hits you in the feels.
Wow.
This is exactly what all that other Disney 100 stuff should have been. Right?
Yeah.
It's a celebration. It's a true celebration of everything since Snow White, all the little things as well. This movie got me to dig into Disney Plus and watched like the old package films. So I watched movies like Saludos Amigos, Three Caballeros, Fun and Fancy Free, which I've never seen in its entirety. It's not very good, understandably, but I watched it because it was featured. Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, these lost relics of Disney history, and they're all put front and center in this film that, there's some of the commercialism there, but the most important thing is celebrating not just the characters, but also the artists. Like, so much of the film is, the story is Mickey and Minnie want to gather everyone together for a photo, and so all your favorites come out of the frames. Now, the big difference between this and just a crass commercial thing is that it's really, really intentionally thrown back to not just the style, but also the technologies of the day. Like, everything, I think 80% of the movie was actually hand-drawn on paper. Like, it's not even computer mouse and stylus. It's on paper as it was back in the 1980s or the 1940s, And so everything looks right. Peter Pan looks like Peter Pan from the 50s, right? Robin Hood or the Aristocats look like that 1960s, 70s Xerox style. The more modern stuff, you have like Moana or Raya and the Last Dragon, and all the styles mesh together in a way that feels very, very satisfying. And of course, it's simple, and it draws just a lot of power and a lot of emotion from the fact that, these guys have been around 100 years. And even, whether you want to admit it or not, this is an important part of our collective cinematic history and culture. And a lot of people throughout the years, like countless people, have put their heart and souls into these characters, and to bring them back for one big hurrah, I think is wonderful stuff. Plus, it's only it's like 11 minutes long.
Wow.
So, I love that your biggest surprise is a short. We've not really done much short.
Well, we don't traditionally see shorts, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think my cynicism going into it compared to what I got out of it, I think that's why it was my biggest surprise.
Well, let's flip it. What's your biggest disappointment of this year, William?
Oh my gosh. This pains me to say. Guys, we love Wes Anderson on this podcast, right?
Here we go.
Oh my gosh. Was I looking forward to Asteroid City? Heck yeah, I was. Was I looking forward to The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar? I told you guys about how important this Roald Dahl short, the collection is to me. Like, I can recite some of those stories off by heart. I have dreamed of watching Henry Sugar on the big screen.
Wait, was this your biggest disappointment, Henry Sugar?
My biggest disappointment with Asteroid City.
Oh, okay.
Parenthesis.
Yes.
And parts of Henry Sugar.
Oh,
Henry Sugar was that the Wes Anderson series of Roald Dahl?
Yes.
On Netflix?
Yes. They're amazing.
They're really good, but I think it falls into the same trap as Asteroid City does.
Sure.
Which is, I think Wes Anderson has become so much more enamored with the art of telling stories than he is with actually telling stories.
Sure.
Have you seen Asteroid City, Jeremy?
No.
It's
because I find with Wes Anderson, I guess you're alluding to this, William. Like, when I love Wes Anderson, I love Wes Anderson. But I wasn't a huge fan of Grand Budapest Hotel.
Really?
No.
That's my favorite one of his.
Yeah, I love Life Aquatic and Isle of Dogs, and I actually really enjoyed French Dispatch. But
me too.
Yeah, but I just find that if it gets too stylistic over story, I don't really want to watch that.
I feel like Asteroid City, and sorry, because this is your pick for disappointment, but and the reviews had said it's style over substance, but still you hope, but it did just feel like, yes, it's super pretty. I don't care about anything that's happening.
And here's the thing, right? The movie is structured in a way, without major spoilers, to make you care less.
Yeah.
Right? The very start of the movie says that all of this is fiction.
Right.
And so why should I care about these characters when they don't even exist within the realities of the movie?
And technically, things are happening in the movie that if it were done differently, it would be heartbreaking.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
there's some sad stuff going on, so it's...
And so I was so removed from the story that the movie was saying.
That's right.
Intentionally, because Wes Anderson, it seems like, again, his interests are about the conceit. Not even the aesthetic.
Oh, definitely the aesthetic.
The central conceit of the film, which is that it's a film about a film about a film,
Right.
basically, right? It's couched in several layers like a nesting doll. And I just
Inception.
found that to be so alienating.
Yeah.
And so all the stuff with Schwartzman and Scarlett Johansson and Tom Hanks, like it's, as you say, Sarah, it's devastating stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't feel any of it at all. And I know Henry Sugar works a lot better because it's kind of taking Dow's prose and then putting it on top of that.
Yeah.
But again, my problem with Henry Sugar is that just on a personal level, it was completely not what I pictured in my head over 20 years.
And to be fair, I feel the same way. Like, I loved the Henry Sugar. I loved watching it because it's the sort of thing that I would have been wanting to see my whole life.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. The short story, which is a long short story, of Henry Sugar is just breathtaking when you're reading it yourself, and it is in your own head. And thank goodness he uses Roald Dahl's prose to the letter, because if you rewrote that or paraphrased it, you would be, that would be a sin.
You would lose a lot.
It would be tantamount to misinterpreting the Bible. It really would. And so he did the best he could with doing that. But you're absolutely right. You're then being forced to see pictures that aren't necessarily exactly as impactful or quite what you would have thought. So that's interesting. And that makes sense as a disappointment, because you've got a lot of emotion caught up in how you want that to be. Yeah.
What's yours, Sarah? What's your biggest disappointment of this year?
Look, this is such a banal thing to say, but I think I'd initially thought, Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. And then I was a bit confused, and I was like, maybe that was last year, but I reviewed it this year, so it must have come out this year. And I actually gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. But then I decided, actually, a bigger disappointment was The Creator. And I know that we devoted a podcast to this a couple of months ago, but I think it was so disappointing because it looked amazing in the trailer, and the theme tune, I know they never use the tune in the trailer that they never use it in the movie, but that's not the point. It looked to me so exciting and so rad and so awesome, and I do not need to belabor the point as to why that film was just a crushing disappointment for me. You've quite rightly said, Jeremy, that when we're recording this, we still have a few weeks of the year left to go, and there's some heavy-hitting stuff to come out. I actually can't remember when Ferrari's coming out, for example. Maybe that's in the new year. But if that lets me down, and that's Michael Mann as well, I will be crushingly disappointed.
The trailer's so good.
Exactly. The trailer is great. Michael Mann is, the director of my favourite film of all time, Heat, 1996. And it's got Adam Driver and so on. I could be more disappointed if that goes wrong. But I think, I don't need to belabor the point. I just think The Creator, we talked about dear old John David Washington, and narratively, who cares? There was just a lot that didn't really work.
I appreciate that. So I consider my biggest disappointment. I mean, I didn't go into The Flash with massive expectations, but it was still a bit meh. It could have been better. Beau is Afraid was another one.
I put that down actually as a big disappointment. Yeah, that was in my
Did
shortlist.
we go see that together?
I don't know.
Did we go see that together?
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, it's got some really cool stuff in it, and it's got lots of just silly stuff in it.
Overall, I went 2 or 2.5 on it, and it was just like, what?
And then the ending doesn't land,
and it's depressing. And
but Joaquin's great.
He's great.
Patty LuPona's great.
Sure.
Oh, Patty LuPona's in
Parker
this?
Posey's great.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
the cast is really good, and I think some of the sequences in and of themselves, like that opening sequence, is so stressful, and it's very similar to probably how you felt watching Mother, right? With
That's
people
right.
Sitting on the
That's right.
Yeah.
A party sort of happens to him.
Yeah.
But that's
This is not my favorite. This is not my biggest disappointment, by the way.
But can I just say, that's our director from Midsummer and whatnot, isn't
Yeah.
it? So, Ari Aster. So, I mean, it was always going to be a nasty piece of work. So, in a way, it wasn't, do you know what I mean? In a way, it wasn't a surprising disappointment. It was just, I'd loved Midsummer.
Yeah.
And, So
I guess I put it there because my disappointments over the last couple of years, and this is the case with what I'm about to say, and with Beau is Afraid as well, are films that could have been my favourite movie of the year, but for a few key elements. you
Right.
know? And so my biggest disappointment of 2023 is Spider-Man Across the Universe. Because I was watching that movie, and I've said this to you all before, but I was watching that movie thinking this is an 11 out of 10 film, to quote Spinal Tap, and I thought this is the culmination of cinema. This is doing everything that we've been building towards over the last 100 years. It is firing on all cylinders. And then, I loved all the scenes with Gwen Stacy, and I thought the characterization of Miles Morales took another step. I thought the visuals were just out of this world, literally. And the ending for me, it went nowhere. That movie didn't go anywhere. And as a result, I actually can barely remember what the story's even about.
Yeah.
I remember the emotional stakes with Gwen and her father, and I remember kind of the whole sequence with all of the Spider-Men and Spider-Woman and spider creatures. But I'm like, on the blobby blocked guy.
Oh, yeah,
he was
I
great.
love that, yeah.
But I just think that movie didn't have an ending, and so therefore for me, it didn't have a reason for me to care about it beyond just the beauty of the visuals and the kind of pop culture referencing.
if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, if that had an ending, it could have still had that cliffhanger ending. It wasn't the cliffhanger that was the issue with it. It was the fact that there was no climax to the story.
Sure.
And so I keep coming back to Avengers Infinity War. They had such a clear arc, that movie. And then Endgame was quite a different film. And yet Infinity War ended with a great cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And I just wish that. And I do still wonder as well if this is a marketing issue. If that had been labelled as part one, I might have felt different.
That's right. That's right. You would have forgiven that in
I
the
would
way
have
that
been
we had to
expecting
with
it.
Dune and things.
Yeah, well, with Dune, it's the same thing. Dune has no ending.
Yeah.
But I didn't begrudge it as much.
Because
I still
you
am a little
knew.
bit frustrated. But I knew. Whereas I had no idea. I had no idea Across the Universe was going to be a part one.
Sure.
And I just, when I saw the IMAX, I think I was it by myself with some friends? But I just got lost in that movie. I was doing a stage show in the Civic Theatre at the time. I went after a Sunday matinee, Anyways, that's my biggest disappointment. Sarah, do you want to jump in with your wildcard film of this year?
Yes. Now, you mentioned, I do have just a couple of mentions, and one of them is Triangle of Sadness.
Hey.
I knew that people had said it was great. I also knew that Ruben Östlund might be quite challenging for me. And I think in a way perhaps this should have been in my list, my short list for biggest surprise, is that Triangle of Sadness literally has all the things I hate, and I absolutely loved the film.
So much poop.
So much poop. Scatological humour in the extreme, vomit and puke and everything else. It
At
has
the same time.
all at the same time. It has dreadful people being dreadful. It has people who get massively drunk and talk rubbish. It has Woody Harrelson, although he's all right. And yet that film was fabulous. However, that is not my pick for wild card. Now, forgive me, I actually have two. One is a wild card because it was so unexpected and absolutely bloody awesome. And then the other is like, what? Which I'll tell you in a minute. So, Scrapper. Scrapper is a really small English film by a young woman, I want to say Jessica, I could be wrong, give me a second.
Again, I feel like, Sarah, you've talked about this one before.
Of course I have,
Like
because
an
it's
episode.
amazing.
Yeah.
Right, Charlotte Regan, yeah? So Charlotte Regan made this film called Scrapper. The reason I'm talking like this, yeah, is it's set in, I want to say East London, it might be West London, yeah? There's a little girl, and her name's Georgie, and she's like 6 or 7 or something like that, and her mum dies right at the beginning of the film. She's got no one else, yeah, but she's really plucky, and she always like looks after herself. She doesn't need nobody. But then one day, her dad, right, who she's never met, her dad, who was a young lad, he jumps over jumps over the back fence and is all like, all right, Georgie, I'm your dad, I'm here to be with you. And she's like, I don't need you. And then, of course, you've got two oddbods trying to, like, figure out that they actually need each other, Anyway, the dad is played by Triangle of Sadness's Harris Dickinson. Now, back in the day, yeah, I saw The King's Man and I thought, what a dumb film. Who's this Harris Dickinson? He's a Noma. He'll never amount to nothing. Then he was in Triangle of Sadness. He was amazing. Now he's in Scrapper. He's a whole different sort of amazing. I loved him. So... all the things that are beautiful about their performances are amazing, and he's incredible. And now I get it about him. She's amazing. I don't even think she'd done nothing before. She's just a kid, yeah. But it was so brave because. And Charlotte Regan must be an extraordinary young director because she put. Do you want me to go back?
No, it's fine.
Because she puts Harris Dickinson together with this young lass, and it's brilliant because they don't know each other, and in real life is what I'm saying, and then they have to perform as a father and daughter who are like reconnected against each of their wills. And there are some stunning moments that, if they're not improv, they are extraordinarily well scripted. And if they are improv, then this little kid in particular is amazing in the way that she, as a newcomer to acting, let alone anything else, is able to riff with Harris Dickinson. It's absolutely stunning. It's the feature debut of the writer-director Charlotte Regan. And the interesting thing, or not, but a bit of trivia, her cinematographer is another young British director called Molly Manning Walker. And she made the film that came to the film festival here and is doing marvels around the world called How to Have Sex. So I don't know if you saw the NZIFF How to Have Sex. That was directed by Molly Manning Walker, who's also a cinematographer, and she shot Charlotte's film.
Right.
So there you go. So Scrapper, absolutely brilliant. Totally recommend it, yeah? Find it wherever you can. You will have such a great time. Nah. My other one, and I cannot do the accent now because we're moving to Japan. Oh my gosh. In the film festival, I went to see this film called River. Mm-hmm. Now, you know me. I'm not great with science. I find time travel very difficult. I find understanding tides very difficult.
Tides?
Yeah.
As in the tide coming in and out?
Yeah. Like, and how it... I don't want to get into it, Jeremy. Now's not the time.
That's quite the segue.
My husband and I joke...
Time travel and tides.
No, my husband and I joke about the fact... Because sometimes he'll tell me something and I'll look a bit confused and he'll go, oh, tides.
You're reminding me of that bit from Bill O'Reilly's old show where he's like, tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that.
Well, I can't, and I don't wish to now. But no, listen, I saw this film called River. It is set in a gorgeous little village outside of Kyoto, whose name I suddenly can't remember, and it doesn't really matter, but it's set in a real-life little village, very traditional, lots of red, orangey red arches, and this little Japanese village, and it's set in a bathhouse, an onsen, and inexplicably... a young woman in a kimono is dealing with the customers, and then she pops down to the river and she's just down there having a little break before she goes back in to deal with the next customer. And then all of a sudden, time stops and it reverses. No, I lie. She's down at the river, she goes inside, and within 2 minutes, time stops and suddenly she finds herself out back by the river. And she's incredibly discombobulated to start with. How have I suddenly come back here? But when she goes inside, it transpires everybody else is also going, whoa, what happened there? And then 2 minutes, boom, back she's down on the river and she comes through. And the film time loops 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, with, of course, the crowd... It's like a Groundhog Day where everybody realizes
that's such a cool conceit.
Everybody's going, what the heck is going on? And by the time they get to the point where they're like, we don't know, but what are we going to do about it? Then they get to build. It's a little bit like Edge of Tomorrow. They get to build on it every time. So this is not a spoiler, but several loops in, they're like, when it happens again, I'll see you across the road in the meeting room. And they try to get to the meeting room in time, but then she's struggling to get up the stairs in time, and it time loops and she's back to the river. So next time she knows to take her shoes off and try and get there in time. Do you know what I mean?
That sounds great.
Yeah. It's so fun.
As someone who's a massive fan of time travel and the
time
tides,
loops
and the tides,
yeah.
It sounds like a great.
It's
watch.
a great time. Highly recommended. Totally bizarre. And
Love it.
Yeah, so that's definitely my wild card.
Nice.
Drops mic.
William, what's your wild card of the year?
So thanks for bringing up Asian cinema, because I have two picks. We don't usually talk about things beyond the sphere of Hollywood or Western indie movies.
Or what's been released here. We tend to talk about, don't we?
Exactly. Yeah. And so, for example, my knowledge of Bollywood and Tollywood movies is almost zero, right? I just don't have that connection, and I wish I did. I just don't have time. What I do watch, though, often Chinese movies. And there's these massive blockbusters that come out every year, kind of tailor-made for a Chinese audience, that is just, it's not released anywhere else, or if it is, it's like the tiniest little film fest thing, whereas in China it makes gobloads of money.
What about the Asian cinema screenings, though, in the Queen Street event?
They would probably have these movies.
Yeah.
I just have not looked into this.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I have two. One of them is called Chang'an, or the English name is Chang'an, but the Chinese name is Chang'an 3万里, or 30,000 miles to Chang'an. And you guys, this is one of the most culturally specific movies I have ever seen. It is going to be alienating to anyone who is not Chinese. I mean that in both a good way and a bad way.
The whole of China, though? Because even within China, different cultures.
Well, I guess you just have to understand Chinese poetry.
Okay.
It is a blockbuster, an animated blockbuster, 3 hours long, beautifully animated, about the most famous Chinese poet of all time, Li Bai, during the Tang Dynasty.
Li Bai.
And his friend, Gao Shi. And... guys, this is the equivalent of if Hollywood made a multi-million-dollar blockbuster of like Wordsworth and Keats,
right?
And they team up to fight crime.
Wow!
Like obviously, historically, I'm pretty sure Li Bai wasn't like a kung fu monk. But basically, it's them growing up together. There are several things drawn from history. You know, one of them was working for the government. The other guy kind of became a recluse and then a Taoist monk of sorts. Intersperses real history. Also makes it a bromance of sorts that kind of goes sour. There are huge battle sequences. And then in the middle of this...
Are they rap battles?
Oh, well,
are they poet battles?
Does poetry feature in these battles?
Wow.
Heck yeah, it does. And so you're having like Tang Dynasty Chinese poetry, which like most Chinese texts through high school or even primary school, you learn these poems, right? So I could recite some of them. There's 300 famous ones. And it contextualizes them in a way so that when someone is saying a poem, it's kind of like Fantasia, where the background fades away, and it's an abstract visualization of the poem done in inks or like paper cranes. It's so cool, but again, completely impenetrable to anyone who has no idea what these poems are. Because the poems themselves, because it's ancient Chinese texts, like they are quite abstract, and the language is archaic. And so it's like, okay, this is not made for Western audiences.
And so even, of course, subtitles. So this is an interesting argument.
The subtitles are really good, because I had it with English and Chinese subtitles on.
Yeah.
And the English subtitles are decent, and the translation of the poems are also pretty decent as well.
Are they, and presumably not literal, but figurative.
Exactly.
Figurative,
So whoever did, bravo to them, because it's hard to translate these poems. But it's like, you just won't care, because like Tang Shi, the Tang Dynasty poems, they are such a core tenet of Chinese literature that if you don't know that, or if you don't really care about that, the movie has nothing for you.
Wow.
But again, this is a movie that made $260 million US in the Chinese box office. It is the second most profitable animated movie in Chinese history. And it's like, okay, so I guess, you know, having cultural specificity can be a good thing.
Of course.
But the one I want to highlight more than this, because I enjoyed it a lot more. Like, China is pretty good. It's pretty clunky, but it is pretty good. Again, it's a wuxiao epic about poets. But the one that I saw, again, this is a 2023 movie that I saw in January. It blew me away. Have you guys heard of Moon Man? So it's a Chinese blockbuster based on a Korean webcomic about a guy stranded on the moon. Okay, so it's kind of like The Martian. Except it's The Martian.
Which is a Ridley Scott film.
Yes,
that's
we
right.
didn't talk about that.
We talked about Ridley in the last
Yeah, well, we
podcast.
didn't mention The Martian.
Yeah.
So this is, what if The Martian was set on the moon and all of humanity was dead? Okay, so the conceit, again, this happens in the first 5 minutes of the movie. The conceit is that United Nations forms like a peacekeeping thing because the asteroid is coming our way. And so they have all these anti-asteroid things on the moon. Something goes wrong. Everyone vacates to Earth. And one guy is left behind.
Well, so what's the point?
The asteroid hits Earth, wipes out civilization.
Well, what would you do?
And it's this one guy. And it's a character study about this one guy trapped on the moon base.
I would just...
It's incredible.
Oh, you're not asking me what would I do?
No, I was thinking like what?
No, but I mean, like, what's the point?
Here's the
You
thing.
can't procreate with yourself.
Here's the thing, Sarah.
But life's more than procreation.
This is...
Yeah, but I mean,
The humanity is restored.
This is at the same time, as you say, a terribly sad, existential question about life, the universe.
For me, it would have been a short film. Sorry.
At the same time, this is a Stephen Chow, Edgar Wright style wacky comedy with a talking kangaroo.
Oh,
It is
Wow.
everything at once.
I think
right?
you lost me at kangaroo.
Okay, so it is. Stay with me. Just stay with me for a little bit. It is a very, very goofy comedy about the end of the world. Right, extremely goofy. Like you see. Again, there's a talking kangaroo in it. That's how goofy it is. But like, the storytelling in this film obviously draws so much influence from Stephen Chow. I'm thinking of God of Cookery and Shaolin Soccer specifically. And also Edgar Wright and how montages are edited together.
Yeah, nice.
And everything I just told you guys about like the moon, the base, all of that is done in a 3-minute montage at the start of the movie. Mankind gets wiped out, and then the title credits smash cut. And I'm just on the edge of my seat going, oh my God.
Yeah.
I've never seen storytelling like this.
Yeah.
It is so rapid fire. I think a lot of it is inspired by filmmaking on TikTok as well, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that mishmashing of images together to make something coherent, but that is really, really like overstimulating.
What's it called again?
Moon Man.
That's
Moon
it.
Man. And it's one of the most wonderful things I've seen all year. It is funny, it's ingenious, it's very, very heartfelt, and it never lets like the sad part of the story overwhelm the happy or the joyous part of the story. Every time something horrible happens, you never forget that you're watching a movie where, again, it's super, super like Buster Keaton slapstick goofy.
Right.
And the balance of those two halves of the movie, as well as the sci-fi conceits, are extraordinary.
Okay.
So that is Moon Man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I sort of considered a few different wildcards. In fact, one of them I had forgotten about until you mentioned it to me on Thursday night, William, when we went and saw a film together. I want to highlight Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny as a runner-up.
Yeah.
Because that's a massive blockbuster that I feel like nobody watched, and it actually was pretty good.
The ending was amazing.
Yeah, and I thought it was a really fitting fifth and potentially final entry into that series. I want to mention Red, White, and Royal Blue. So it's a book adaptation. It's a romantic comedy with a ridiculous premise, as many romantic comedies are. It's a queer comedy. So what if the son of the president fell in love with the grandson of the King of England? But it's quite a wonderful film.
Oh my gosh.
Cheesy as, but there's some really... I guess in terms of it like being a gay love story, it's made... The director and the writer, definitely the director is gay, and you can tell that the awareness of what it means to be in those relationships is present in the film. And it depicts sex and relationships in quite a responsible way, because if I think about texts like sex education, which I've still got to finish the final season of that, that's quite irresponsible. It's sort of or Euphoria is another one, right? It's like these shock factors that people say, well, it's R-rated, it's not for young people. It's like, well, young people are watching these things, and it's whereas this film kind of does a much better job with that topic. But I am going to pick a TV series as my wild card because I don't really know what to do with this text, but it stuck with me, even though I forgot about it the other night and you reminded me. And that is Mrs. Davis, which is the Damon Lindelof and the creator of The Big Bang Theory collaborated on this television series that I watched, and nobody seems to be watching it.
Yeah.
Wonderful performances. It's set in a world where an AI known as Mrs. Davis has effectively taken over the world and made the world a better place. Or has it? And
Who does her voice?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay. So not Kate Blanchett.
No. And it's about the main character is a nun who has a reason, and we discover as the show goes on, to hate and distrust the AI.
Okay.
And And the opening episode is about the AI having a meeting with this nun and saying, I need you to find the Holy Grail and destroy it. I need you to find the Holy Grail, yes, and destroy it. And she says, what do you want to return? And the nun says, cool, if I do that for you, then you need to turn yourself off. And so that's the kind of setup of the series. It's very strange.
It's had one season.
Yeah, and it would as well, because it's a mini-series. Like, it has a very satisfying ending. Like, if you can get to the ending, all of the pieces fall into place in a really satisfying way. But it is weird. Like, you will know whether you can handle it from the first episode, because you're like, what am I watching? In fact, the first few episodes are so weird. Tonally, it's all over the show. It's kind of trying to be funny at times, and it's not very funny, and sometimes it is very funny.
I find Betty Gilpin, who is the lead.
Oh, okay.
I find her funny.
She's great.
It's not the one with the poster of the nun on the motorbike.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's my wild card, is Mrs. Davis, mainly because I need other people to watch it so you can tell me whether it's any good or not.
Right. To validate you.
Well, not to validate me. I just need to figure out what I think about it. Nobody else is watching it.
No. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
All right. Should we finish off with
pick.
our... Well, it feels like a good segue, isn't it? So, Sarah, let's go to you. We'll go around the circle.
Well...
Best TV of 2023.
Oh, look, there's no question. Jury Duty.
Of course.
Have you guys watched it yet? Or, like, why are we even friends?
You've asked us this question multiple times. I watched one episode.
Yeah, I've also now watched one episode.
Okay, well, don't tell me that you didn't like it. I'm not going to spoiler it. Mm-hmm. The premise is the thing. So, Jury Duty is reality television, non-fiction programming, but the premise is absolute genius, and it is a comedy, without question. Jury Duty is, don't ask me, I don't know, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, I'm not 100% sure, it doesn't matter. It's a proper series, and it goes behind the scenes of a jury on a relatively lo-fi criminal court case in America. So the whole conceit of it is pretty straightforward. If it were a normal reality show, what they would be doing is they would be getting the pool of people in, they would be getting the jurors picked, and then we would be going behind the scenes and talking to the jurors who are in a court case, and we would be going behind the scenes of an actual court case, because as it says on the title card at the beginning of the show, legally you are not allowed to ever know what goes on in a juror's room. So this, a juror's decision room. So this is groundbreaking, and this is the first opportunity to actually do that. The big joke is every single person in the show, from the judge to the accused, to the court officials, to the 11 members of the jury, are actors, and one guy is a real guy. And this one guy, who I want to call Ronald all of a sudden, oh my God, he is the most gorgeous, wonderful, good-hearted, ordinary young American man who thinks that he knows that he's part of a reality TV show, a documentary series. So he knows that he has given consent to be interviewed about the way the court case is going. But what he doesn't know, and does not find out, of course, until the very end, is that all the other people are actors. And the pièce de résistance is that one of the acting jury members is the real-life James Marsden. So the actor, James Marsden, plays himself, although in that brilliant sort of way, plays a slightly hyperbolic, a slightly caricatured version of himself. So Ronald, oh my God, I hope his name is Ronald after all this.
Is it Ron Weasley?
Oh no, Ronald Gladden, that's right. So Ronald Gladden, he does know that James Marsden's a real person. So initially he's a little bit starstruck, and then they just become mates, because real James Marsden would be a real good guy. And it is absolutely priceless, hilarious, heartwarming. And may I just say, if anyone is listening and thinking that sounds really mean, it is never, ever mocking at anybody except James Marsden by consent. But it's never mocking. So there is not the case of, we're laughing at Ronald Gladden because he's not in on this. And it's, oh my God, absolutely brilliant television, fascinating, legit documentary making, in that you don't know how things are going to go until they unfold. And this is not a spoiler, but the production team have written what they hope might happen, but they've got to work with how things go. And so they try and set up certain scenarios, and then depending on how Ronald deals with that scenario, the path might go off slightly differently. I could not recommend it more highly. I cannot wait to watch it again. And my favourite moment, which I will spoiler, happens very early on when they are selecting the jury. And so for those of you who don't know, in jury selection, the prosecutor and the defence get to ask each possible juror a series of questions to ascertain whether they should or shouldn't be on the jury. So James Marsden stands and they say, the prosecutor says, "Have you ever been on a jury before?" And he says, "Yes, I have." And she says, "Well, where was that?" And he said, Cannes. And the prosecutor goes, "Cannes in France?" And he says, "Yes, Cannes, the film festival." And she's like, no, not that sort of jury. Have you ever? And he's like, "Oh, no, I haven't."
That reminds me of a Schitt's Creek improvisation when Catherine O'Hara gets asked about her favourite season. She goes, "Awards."
Yeah.
Exactly. It's exactly. So there you go, jury duty, and I can. So there we are.
Nice.
Thank you for listening to my TED talk.
I appreciate it. William, I think we're going to hear William's TED talk now. You got
Yeah.
a list of runner-ups.
I do have a list of runner-ups. First of all, I just want to highlight something that I've mentioned on the show before, I think 2 years ago, which is Reservation Dogs. And again, a show that apparently no one watches.
Yeah.
But it is one of the greatest shows, and now it's over.
I know a lot of people who watch it.
Oh, good.
But
Thank you.
Didn't get into it.
It's so they just finished season 3, and that is the final season. And season 2 and 3, I think season 2 is probably a little stronger than season 3, because season 3 they knew they were ending, and so they kind of just throw everything they want to tell, every kind of story they want to tell, and see what sticks. And some of it works better than others. But it doesn't matter that it's an uneven show. What Reservation Dogs is doing is unprecedented, right? I've talked before about how the entire creative endeavor is Indigenous-driven, telling a very, very specific Oklahoman Indigenous story. And yeah, it's a slice of life featuring these kids on a reservation. In season 3, they start finding their own paths forward into an uncertain future. And it is some of the most heartfelt and equally some of the most hilarious writing I've ever seen on television. One final thing that I do want to highlight, which is, I told you guys you got to watch the show, which is Scavenger's Reign on HBO Max, or Max, the one to watch for HBO. You guys know Mobius, the French illustrator? Amazing sci-fi art, right? Imagine Mobius mixed with Akira, so the manga or anime with horrible genetic mutations and psychic powers, mixed with, if you know the video game Subnautica, which is a survival game underwater, mixed with the film Annihilation. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Scavenger's Reign is a beautiful animated series about a crew of a almost Nostromo-like hauler who crash land on an uncharted planet. And the survivors need to, make sense of their surroundings and try and get away to get off planet. The problem is their surroundings are A, beautiful, and B, trying to kill them, right? It is a show that is obsessed with creating a fictional ecosystem where everything feels very, very original and different. You've never seen alien plants and animals like these before. And they are, again, at the same time, beautiful and extremely dangerous. And it's about 3 disparate groups of survivors trying to get back to the main ship and about the stories of survival as they go through this. Really, really
Is that on a
highly
streamer
recommended.
here?
Yes. Well, it's on Max, the one to watch for HBO. There are options of watching it in New Zealand and Australia.
Right.
Yeah. And then I think you guys know my series of the year. I've raved about it as well. It's The Bear Season 2.
Yeah,
Oh,
nice.
I don't mind that you mentioned that, because we finished watching Bear Season 2 last night. Are you watching The Bear?
No, but I want to, and I've watched a little bit of it, and I've loved what I've seen. I love the
Season
actors
1.
in it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but it's season 2,
Oh,
because
okay.
my flatmate
yeah.
watches it.
So you're-
but I have
you've
no
done-
context. I have no context.
Oh,
of
so
any
you
of the
jumped straight
characters.
into Season 2?
Oh, like a random piece of episode here and there. So I don't feel like I've had anything spoiled because I didn't really know what was going on.
Right.
But the reason what stopped me is that, working in a restaurant is one of the worst times of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to be in the right headspace to
And it's
get
a
through.
very stressful program.
Yeah.
No matter who you are. I've never worked in a restaurant. I only eat in restaurants.
Yeah.
I've never had a mother like Jamie Lee Curtis's character. And
See, I've heard of this, but I haven't got to that.
it's okay. And that's not a spoiler. It's just, she's a challenging mom. But oh my gosh. It is a
The
stressful...
Christmas episode with Jamie Lee Curtis made me feel sort of physically sick.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a Christmas gathering of a very Italian family, and what transpires in that episode, you're like, okay, this makes so much more sense.
But also, and then I guess they count as cameos, but
there's so many famous
the
people.
guest stars in it will blow your mind. And you think, that was an interesting kind of one-off episode, flashback. But actually, everything in The Bear is context.
Yeah.
And that's what's... Oh, sorry, this was your
Oh,
show.
no, go for it.
But it's very, very well done. Very well done. And there will be tiny, not Easter eggs, but callbacks to things that are not made explicit. That you go, that's why they mentioned that in that episode. Oh, that's why he went there. Oh, look, that's cute that they brought that back. Hey, it's very, very well written.
It's so tight, like callbacks to season 1 and also earlier episodes in season 2.
Yeah.
Completely agreed, Sarah. Like, so much of season 2 is constructed like it's like a Swiss watch. It's clockwork.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I did love a show before that really sold later on, which is Ted Lasso, and I find
I still haven't watched. I still haven't finished.
We gave it up.
I haven't watched the final
No,
season.
neither. We haven't. We gave it up.
I found the end of season 2 so frustrating and disappointing.
Yeah.
I've
season
watched one
2 just
episode, I think.
crushed me.
Yeah, I think I watched one episode of season 3.
And I don't know if I want to watch Nick Muhammad turn into what he turns into. But anyway, yeah.
And so I think the bear understands that there's a lot of Lasso comparisons, right?
Yeah.
As I said last time when I talked about the bear, and what was it, last year's episode or the year before? There's a lot of Lasso comparisons. It's about a work family that have to struggle through their differences in order to get to a better place. But what the bear does in season 2 is that it understands that each of these characters need their moment to be alone.
Yeah.
To shine in their own spheres of influence, but also for those stories to tie back in a really big way with the main restaurant storyline, which is what Lasso doesn't do.
Yeah.
I remember the Coach Beard episode, and it's like, what are we doing here? This is just a waste of time.
Yeah, no, that was.
And so the bear does amazing things. Like, I'm just gonna gush about it. There's an episode with Sydney, so Eberere's character, where she just goes on a foodie trip around Chicago trying to find inspiration for a dish. And it is one of the most beautiful visualizations of the creative process I've ever seen. Like, sort of like Fantasia or Ratatouille or Eat Man, Drink Woman. Like, she's eating these things, and as she's doing so, it cuts to a screen of pitch black. And these flashes of color and of sauce and ingredients start to coalesce
It is
in
like
her
an
mind.
extraordinary... I said to Doug as we were finishing the episode last night, it is like an extraordinary cooking show at the same time, because she makes an omelette in one episode.
Oh, that omelette.
And you think, write this down, you know, and yet it isn't like that. It's not 500 grams or da-da-da. But the whole making of it, and then, this is not a spoiler, as I always say, and then later in the episode, she talks about the pleasure of having made the omelette, and you think, I got that. And she's an actress. But, you think, I could see that while you were doing it. It felt like fun and loving and intentional and magical, and the person receives it thus, and she says, that's how I felt making it. Well, that's great acting, television, writing, everything.
Everything.
Photography, everything. Really, it's amazing.
And I think that is what balances all the stressful bits, because I think season 2 mellows out quite a bit from season 1. Season 1, there's some episodes, there's the one-shot episode, which is like, by the end of it, you're left breathless. Season 2, the Christmas episode gets to that place, but it's much more about exploring the characters and situations. And the final thing I'll say, again, I think MVP for me this season is Ebon Moss-Bacharach, who plays Cousin Richie.
Don't explain why.
I won't.
What is MVP?
Most valuable player. But again,
So-
it's a character who starts off as just a kind of a supporting character.
He's just someone in the background who swears a lot, and he's the butt of the jokes, right?
And how privileging it is to give everybody their moment to become a real person, a real boy.
A real boy. And his character, as well as the rest of the restaurant, but specifically his, Like my heart grew 3 sizes. Like
Yeah.
it's so satisfying, the storytelling involved. And this show is just firing on all cylinders. I can't wait to see what they come up with next.
Nice, cool. And it's one I do want to see, definitely.
Yeah.
But I need to be in the right kind of prepare myself.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've watched mostly reality television this year, and you both know I'm a huge fan of Survivor.
Yeah.
Which I'm on another podcast with my friends. We talk about it, and Survivor releases 2 seasons a year. I'm watching season 45 right now, but season 44 had a castmate called Caroline, and she was just some of the best comedy gold I've seen.
They're all
ever.
American, yes?
Canadian and American.
No, what I mean is it's an American show, sorry,
Yeah.
Survivor? Yeah.
But that, we don't talk about reality TV. I just had to say that though, that show has just got such a special place in my heart. I really enjoyed Poker Face this year. I think
nice.
Ryan
Yeah, that was
Johnson's.
good.
Yeah, I watched a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
And I like those being relatively standalone.
Yeah.
With,
yeah.
the odd
It's like-
reference to others.
It's like the Incredible Hulk if the Hulk solved crimes everywhere.
that's
And it's
nice,
a great
isn't it?
because you know who does you always start the episode with
knowing how.
what the crime is,
And
then
work
then you
backwards.
work backwards and you realise that Natasha Lyonne's been there the whole time or
Yeah,
comes into it.
yeah.
And how is she going to
Yeah.
not only figure this out, but do the right
Use
thing
her
and
special
give them to
skills.
the police without giving herself away? Like
Yeah.
it's a great
and then
conceit.
move on like the littlest hobo.
Yeah. and that would have been my series of the year if it weren't for something coming out this weekend. So this is something that has yet to be released, but it is something that I have been waiting for years. It's something that I grieve about when I first engaged with this content. And then when I heard about the plans that this director had, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to see that. And that is Faraway Downs. Do you know what Faraway Downs is?
No.
I don't think so.
Faraway Downs is the 6-episode miniseries that is the re-editing, restructuring, repurposing of Baz Luhrmann's Australia.
Oh, I've heard about that.
So Baz Luhrmann has taken his film, which he has publicly said is the one creative project where he lost creative control, and decries the fact that the studio forced him to make a version of the film that was not what he wanted to do.
Right.
He's been working with Indigenous voices and artists in Australia to recast that film. By
Yes.
recast, I mean recraft, not recast. No, Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman are in it.
Right.
It's all of the footage that he filmed. He said he's filmed hours and hours of footage. He has a different ending. There's apparently animated sequences throughout the film.
Yeah.
It focuses more specifically on the young Indigenous boy, not on the Nicole Kidman and the Hugh Jackman story, which, if you watch Australia, is how that movie starts.
Right.
And I always thought that film, the first hour and a half of that 3-hour freaking movie, the first hour and a half, the drover sequence where they're driving the cattle.
I've never seen it.
Oh, is spectacular. The first
Right.
hour and a half is just like, when I was in the cinema, I was like, this is amazing. And it was the first Baz Luhrmann we'd had since Moulin Rouge.
Right.
And then the movie kind of just has this weird tonal shift. They kind of return home, and then there's this tacked on Attack of Darwin in the final parts of the film.
Right.
And so to think that 3-hour movie is going to be reshaped into 6 1-hour or
much
45.
more palatable and proper. Yeah.
And that he's actually worked more consciously with Indigenous artists. I just saw today on Instagram they've created new music for it, and by
Right.
music I mean what Baz Luhrmann does wonderfully,
Yeah.
which is work with actual artists and creates incredible. I mean, his albums are some of the best albums of Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
What's the one? The 20s one. Great Gatsby.
Yes.
Like his albums, and of course Elvis.
I want to rewatch Great
The
Gatsby.
Get
The
Down,
Get Down,
is
yeah.
brilliant. A Netflix pilot. You know, the series
Yep,
falls
yep.
off the cliff, but the first episode is wonderful. So I just have this feeling that it's going to be great. The first reports of the first episode, because that's all that's been seen,
Yeah.
is through the roof. But that's never been the problem with that text. It's the end of it's how it's going to wrap up that I'm interested in. And for me, it was never the content that was the issue. It was the pacing, the editing, the tone of
What
the
an
piece.
extraordinary project to take existing content and more, because as you say, it's hours and hours and hours, so not everything that's just from the film, and then be able to recraft arguably what you really wanted out of it. Isn't that amazing? Without having to bring back Nicole and Hugh and
So I'm really excited.
very interesting.
And if it's a flop, it's a flop, you know. But I don't know, like I think when Luhrmann has space to do what he does well, he can be wonderful. And his biggest issue with his most recent films is they're just too long and they're too languid, whereas a miniseries is perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, team, that is our wrap-up of 2023. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again in January with our usual kind of structure. But, yeah, just thank you for all of our listeners of Cinema in Context. We've been doing this now for, we started in 2016, didn't we? So we're going to be coming up to our 100th episode next year.
Wow.
That feels significant.
Yes, it is.
Like, I wonder if we should do a bit of a clip show or something. Nah, what's
Our 100 best films.
Wow. Maybe our best.
I'm joking, William Chen.
I was just grabbing my notebook.
No.
I've been thinking maybe our favourite movies of the current films we've done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But hey, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
But thank you again, listeners. We really appreciate it. So thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoy our podcast, then please suggest it to your film-loving friends. Check out our Patreon. You can listen to Cinema in Context on SoundCloud, Spotify, Radio Public, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. Our Patreon is patreon.com/Cinema in Context. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode, as well as give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in 2024, and until then,
No hora mai!